May take a few seconds of your time. I'd like to give a little shout out also to the guys from the channel Kendo Show. They make very good videos about Kendo, very well made, very professional, and I definitely support them. Check them out if you're interested in Kendo. Ghost of Tsushima, definitely a must buy for all of us samurai wannabes. Or is it? Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. Welcome to this Ghost of Tsushima review and historical evaluation. Ghost of Tsushima was definitely the most exciting part of this 2018 E3. Now in this video we will be focusing on three areas. We will first briefly talk about the graphics because visuals were amazing, but there are a few things I'd like to say about that. And secondly, we will focus on the most important part, combat/gameplay. And last but not least, as you know, I'm a history buff, so we will do a little historical evaluation of the historical accuracy of this game. How well is it depicting the period it is set in? Clearly, what we were presented with looks absolutely amazing. It's stunning. Question is the game really going to look that good? Because we have seen already at E3 quite a few times a game looking brilliant in the trailer, and then the actual game that at release looked nothing like it. So I hope that this is not one of those cases. What I'm saying is, don't get too hyped for the graphics. I don't even know if even PS4 Pro can handle that sort of graphics. And also keep in mind that the developers of the game have purposely reduced to a minimum the hub in order to show off the graphics. So in-game graphics might have a bit more hub, and most importantly, it might not be as good looking. At the moment, clearly the game looks absolutely amazing. If they keep it this way, it might be the best looking game of 2018 on PS4. And I can't even imagine, can't even fathom how good it would look on a PC setting if the game were to be published on Steam. For the graphics, let's just leave it to that. It looks good for now. So something that I really appreciated is that this game seems like a fresh start after a whole series of clones of Dark Souls. Now don't get me wrong, I love the Dark Souls series. I played Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, 2, 3. Of course we've got Bloodborne and we have Nioh. So now it's good that this game is not just another clone of that sort of game. But what kind of game is it? Now we will be examining the sections of combat in this trailer, definitely, because there are some very good things, but also some pretty bad things. But first, I'd like to focus on a piece of interview that I'd like to share with you to one of the developers himself, because there is a question we need to examine. Hear this.
Just as we can see it going on right now, when it comes to the combat, is it kind of like stance-based? I'm thinking, it reminded me a little bit of For Honor. You could see like the main character would go into a stance and the lady would kind of try and match up, is that correct?
Yeah.
So, For Honor, no. Sorry to say, interviewer, but you are wrong. The game does not remind For Honor. The game reminds me more of a mixture between The Witcher 3 and the series, a series I particularly like, Way of the Samurai, particularly the fourth one. It's a mix between these two. I don't see anything that resembles the For Honor fighting style. Also, she asked a very direct question. She said, are you going to feature a stance-based system of combat? But he avoids the question, which is a shame, to be honest.
So the goal with the combat, especially what we've shown here in the we call that the mud pit, is a couple things. It's one, we really want the combat to plant you into the world. So if you're in leaves, you're going to kick up leaves. If you're in the mud, you're going to get mud, splashed all over. If you do a bunch of rolls, you'll just get caked in mud. If it rains, it goes away. We really want you to be planted in the world. And then for the combat experience, the actual combat experience, we really want it to be, we call it mud, blood, and steel. But we really want it to be fairly visceral times. The violence, push it a little bit more when you're maybe like on a finishing move or towards the end of the fight.
I mean, I like the guy, but I would have wanted an answer there. And here is why. Dealing with the combat now. But here's the thing, even if the developers didn't announce that, if we look at the trailer, he never changed stance. At one point, I think the reason why the interviewer got confused is because at one point he clearly sort of uses a different stance, but I believe, and it's quite obvious, that that is the block button, the block trigger being pushed. That is the classic, typical blocking feature, which is a feature I don't particularly like in games, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But at the moment we see that the character has got a fixed stance. The protagonist has got his stance, the other samurai woman has got her own stance, and we will examine these from a Kenjutsu point of view in a moment, as I am a Kenjutsu practitioner. I don't see the possibility to switch stances. Whether they will add that or not, we don't know. I hope they will, because to be honest, at the moment, that is the trend. Nioh For Honor, even Bushido Blade back in the day, all features this. Way of the Samurai features this system, which was sort of very raw in Way of the Samurai 3, but it became more perfected in Way of the Samurai 4. It works perfectly there. So it's a bit of a shame that if they don't go down that road. The reason for that is because when you have the ability to change stance, which changes the effectiveness of your attacks, the combat gameplay becomes more satisfying, more realistic, and more rewarding. It's more complex. Whereas when you don't have the ability to switch stances in swordplay, it all becomes just smashing buttons at the right moment. The game has got a lot of potential. I believe this should be implemented. So what about the current stances, the way they fight, the way they use the sword? Is it realistic or not? The woman samurai, she uses a real Kenjutsu stance, which is called In no Kamae, similar to the Kendo version Hasso no Kamae. So that looks good, but the stance used by the protagonist, to be honest, I've never seen it. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't know every single possible version of Kenjutsu. I'm only trained in Katori Shintoryu, and I'm not a master of Katori Shintoryu. And I do know that some stances that feature katate ken, or the ability to hold the weapon, the sword, with one hand exist. But something like this, personally, I've never seen it. Please let me know if any of you know of a stance like this, but at the moment it does not look particularly realistic. And also, I think the game would have benefited a lot if, first off, the moment you draw your sword, the character goes into a Seigan no Kamae. It was very basic, very neutral, and then you have the ability to switch stance, for example, to a In no Kamae, like the samurai woman, a very safe stance, particularly if you are wearing a helmet, or in the case when you're not wearing a helmet, it could be good to be able to switch to a very aggressive Jodan no Kamae or upper stance. Considering the game is set in a period in which the length of the sword was not standardized and you had longer and shorter swords, then it would be good to also feature Sha no Kamae or Waki, the Kamae where you hide the length of your sword as a strategic and tactical advantage against your opponent. All of this would bring such a level of depth into the game. I think it's a must. If they just leave it to a game to just pushing buttons and then he does whatever he wants, it would be a little bit of a shame. Now, as far as Jodan no Kamae, we do see that sometimes he does transition, or it seems like the samurai transitions into a stance in the middle of swinging. That which is good. Again, it would be nice to see that more often, to see also lower stances perhaps. And again, going back to the idea of blocking, I don't think the idea of you hold the block button down and you are basically invulnerable for a certain amount of time is a good idea. This is a system that is a bit dated. Even Way of the Samurai used this system, and the idea was if someone becomes a blocker and just keeps on blocking, the opponent will do a throw. But to be honest, this does not bring the depth of real swordsmanship. I think it's much better, and I believe the game does feature that, to just leave it to push the block button at the right moment, just before the opponent's blade hits you. That makes the game clearly more difficult, but it also will bring more satisfaction when you manage to master the blocking system, and can give real tactical advantages such as unbalancing your opponent or leaving him open for a counterattack. I'd like to give a little shout out to a friend of mine. Her name is Chibi-chan. On the video you will find in the description below, she's actually dancing in Venice. She normally dances like Japanese pop music or anime, so if you're not into that, just don't click it. But if you like that and you want to see a cute girl dancing, there you can click and say hello from the Metatron channel. She is a very good friend of mine, and to be 100% honest, she's actually my ex-girlfriend, and we are still very good friends, so I thought, why not giving her a hand since she's now making videos on YouTube. She looks a lot younger than she is, just like I do. So what about the way the game is set? Does it make sense? Is it historically accurate? Well, what we understand is that clearly the game is called Ghost of Tsushima. You are the Ghost of Tsushima, one of the survivors of the Mongolian invasion in the Isle of Tsushima. Now here's the thing, the game is set in 1274, so we are at the beginning of the very first Mongolian invasion, and the game tells us that, at least the trailer tells us, that we are on the 8th day. The Mongolian invasion occurred in the 5th of October 1274. We understand exactly where we are from a temporal point of view. And because of that, I've got already a few problems. Problem number one, why are the characters using, both samurai, wearing what seem to be a daisho, so the composition of a long sword and a short sword, with what seem to be clearly a katana and wakizashi. That is a later invention. So if you want to set the game into the times of the Mongolian invasion, then you need to consider this. These characters, they can have a daisho, but it would probably be a tachi, so a longer sword, more with a more pronounced curvature, and a tanto. That would have been much more common. And the sword should be mounted cutting edge down, not cutting edge up. What we see there is more of a Muromachi period situation, which was then pushed and became common in the later Momoyama period. So it's kind of strange to see this. The swords are matched, again, something that will happen in later periods. It's very, very anachronistic. I do appreciate the fact that the samurai woman is using a bow, arrows, and the yebira, the quiver, looks good. The fact that she's wearing it on the back, not a problem. Clearly, for mounted samurai, it would have been much more easier to just mount your quiver in your horse saddle, but we do know that some samurai wore the quiver on the side, others wore it on the back. So that is also historically accurate. Personally, I would have preferred it to be mounted on the sides just for a change, but that's fine. If they think that that's cooler to look at, I have no problems with that. But I think also the protagonist should be using bow and arrow. Now, clearly you can find a million excuses on to why he has lost his bow or whatever, but then at least a yari would be good, or at least giving us the choice to use other weapons would be good. We still don't know if we are limited to the sword. Clearly, a sword in the battlefield situation would be a backup weapon for the samurai. Let's keep that in mind. The sword becomes a very important symbol of the samurai caste, you know, with the whole idea of containing the spirit of the samurai. All of this, it's a Edo Jidai, the times of peace, invention and philosophy. That is not something that the samurai of the time of Kamakura period would have thought, would have done. The sword was not that much of an important weapon at the time. Now, it's true that the uchigatana, apart from the katana, the uchigatana, the sort of predecessor of the katana, starts to be developed exactly at this time, and that is because it was a response to the fact that the armor, the boiled leather armor worn by the Mongolians, it was difficult to cut it with the tachi, so they started developing different swords. But again, we are on the 8th day, so it's very strange again to see that sort of combination of swords used by the samurai, and used in a way that is much, much later to that period. He at first uses a yaido technique, we see that, and I don't mind that. One thing that I really like is the physics of the cut. It really gives the idea of the weapon you're using is lethal, one hit and he's gone, and it really gives the idea of penetration, of killing. It's very strange that they can penetrate that sort of leather armor. We do know through the historical accounts that leather armor was very effective, and it was difficult to penetrate with the swords of the Japanese, but it's a video game, so we can give a little bit of artistic convention. Still, it functions very well. What I don't like is the way he spins, the way he does the attacks. Those don't look, some look very reasonable and believable, but other ones don't. Now, a friend of mine who is a Kendo practitioner did mention that some of the cuts were very strange, but please keep in mind that you should not look at samurai combat from Kendo perspective. Kendo is very much simplified, it has a lot less cuts. In Kenjutsu you have also upward cuts, for example. You don't only have downward cuts. So some of the cuts are still believable, but others are very strange, particularly again the spinning ones. I know why they use them, it's very cinematographics, but it kills the immersion of samurai combat. Real samurai combat minimizes the movement to what is extremely necessary. Spinning, overswinging, going outside your actual silhouette is very dangerous, and it's not what the samurai did. Incidentally, the sort of door she's wearing, which is a scaled one, is good for the time, and as far as I could see. And I own a very similar one, so as you can see, it looks like it's very well made, and I think they have done their research for the samurai armor. Hopefully, for all the other samurai that we will see, they will use period armor, and hopefully we won't see anachronistic representations of samurai armor from later eras like the Sengoku Jidai. I hope that doesn't happen, because then it wouldn't really make sense to set it into such a very important and historical time period. We need armor of that time. Now, many things changed, not only the construction of weapons and the fighting style, but a lot of things changed because of the arrival of the Mongols, and I hope that these things will be shown in the game. For example, the Kyushu samurai were better organized. They also ordered the construction of forts, large stone walls, defensive structures in the potential landing points. All of this would have been constructed within 2 years from 1274. So by 1276, the landscape of Kyushu would have changed, and I hope that all of this will be shown. If there is a sort of passing of time in game, then these things could appear, and that could be good, particularly with this beautiful graphical engine. Fun fact, where is Tsushima Island? Well, it's an island of the Japanese archipelago which is found in the Korea Strait. It's approximately halfway between the Japanese mainland and the Korean peninsula, which also helps us understand why the Mongols chose to attack this very spot. It is located in the west of the Kanmon Strait at a latitude between Honshu and Kyushu of the Japanese mainland. Apparently, on a clear day, it is possible to see the hills and mountains of the Korean peninsula from the higher elevations of the two northern mountains at Tsushima. So, all in all, the game looks good. I think it's going to be very interesting, but I hope that they will make it closer and more historically accurate. Of course, I will have to play before I can actually create a real review. This is a review of the trailer, but at the moment I am 50% hyped, 50% scared. So I hope that they do pull out a very, very good game, and until then, we'll just have to keep on watching this trailer. I wish to thank you, of course, for your time. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, this episode, and if you like this sort of historical evaluations and combined with reviews of video games that have to do with either the Roman Empire, medieval knights, or the samurai, which are the areas of my sort of expertise, but please let me know, because I could continue this into a series among the actual historical videos and linguistic content. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, the Metatron has spread his wings. Goodbye, noble ones.